people don't want to feel vulnerable. But you get to a point where even if you're saying good things or bad things, you're still saying something. So I still have your attention. The difference is when I see how many distractions are out here, I can choose to be like everyone else, or I can just choose to be myself. So I never felt like I was imposing or someone that I wasn't. This is just naturally who I am. So I think the messages that I curate, they're going to reach the intended audience.
Yeah.
That's why I don't, And that's why I don't try to get into what someone else is doing. And I'm like, I never look at someone else's success as my success is less than, because I get to define that.
Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast. I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I've got a very exciting guest, Mr. Davion McKnight. Davian is someone like a few of my guests that I came across online, just scrolling through, doing all the scrolling that I don't like to do very much of, but I came across a reel that Davian made probably about a year ago. Well, it was during hunting season, and he had just shot a nice deer, and he was talking about that. I saw his handle, lifting weights in real estate. I said, okay, this is somebody I need to follow. And since then, I've realized through his content that there's a lot more to the man than the guy I saw, killing a nice buck. So after several months of watching his content, I reached out to Davian, asking if he'd hop on the podcast, because I knew he'd have a lot of value to share with our audience. And we've been trying to coordinate it for a while now, but we finally got him on here, and I'm excited about it. Before I turn it over to Davian for his introduction, I do want to turn it over to my man, JJ, for JJ's Joke of the Week. Take it away, JJ.
Why did the duck get in trouble in school? Because he was always quacking jokes.
All right, buddy. That was a good one. So, Davion McKnight, first of all, thank you for being here with me, my man.
Hey, not a problem. Glad to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me on. I've watched some of your content online as well, specifically on YouTube. So I'm excited for the opportunity to have a great conversation and just proliferate and share information to your audience.
Yep. So we're gonna unpack a lot of stuff here today, and like most of my episodes, I don't know where it's gonna go, so we'll go down all kinds of rabbit holes. But I'm excited to hear what you have to share. And with that, Davian, I'm gonna turn it over to you and just let you introduce yourself in any means you want to do so, and then we'll take it from there. So take it away, my man.
I appreciate that. So my name is Davian McKnight. I am an avid hunter and outdoorsman. I am also a farmer. Spent some time flying Cessna 172s. I haven't posted a lot of content about that, but I participate in this program called the Young Eagles, where you can work with youth from the ages of 8 to 17, and this is their introduction into aviation. Being a kid of public school education, I didn't get many of these opportunities. So what I do as an adult is to share information to help expose more people to different types of lifestyles, whether that be gardening, hunting, fishing, whatever it may be, just getting more people outside and off of their screens. And I think connecting with people like you gives guys like me the opportunity to share these type of messages.
Yep, absolutely. Where is home to you, Davian?
So I am from the great state of South Carolina.
Okay. Gotcha. And born and raised?
Born and raised.
Okay, gotcha. So let's go back a little bit before we get into what you're doing now. So you obviously have a gigantic, like, service-based mentality, right? You want to serve, you want to help, you want to teach, you want to coach, and have a positive influence on things that you're are passionate about. What influence did you have in your life, maybe at an early age or throughout as you've become an adult, that you think that you can tie that to?
I would say community. Raised mostly by a village, if you will, which really doesn't exist now. So when you have people surrounding you, my father wasn't really around. He had some run-ins with the law early on. So he was a recidivist, meaning frequently in and out of prison, so seeing that, but he was also a great athlete. So he had a reputation that preceded him. Everyone in my community often would compare me to my father, and they would lead with how great of an athlete he was. And then the second statement would be, but don't be like your father. So after a while, you get that ingrained in your mindset. And when you really want to make that change, you kind of have to make a decision. Am I going to go left? All right. You get to that fork in the road, if you will. And for me, I volunteered to join the United States Marine Corps at 17. I wasn't even old enough to join. My mom actually had to sign for me. Now, as an older man being 40 now, I come to the conclusion, given my environment, I was willing to risk my life for a better opportunity. I don't want other people to have to experience that. So I share opportunities so they can figure out which path is going to be the right path for them.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. And we spoke a little bit offline, similar with my father as well, you know, and you know, in your situation. So let me ask you this. So, you know, he had the background as a athlete and had notoriety around that. Um, did you play sports in high school?
I played sports, but I found myself to be a bit troubled. You know, reflecting on it, you know, absent father. I was raised mostly by my grandmother before I started actually living with my mom. But the more I look at it, it wasn't that I was a troublemaker. They just weren't teaching things that I was interested in. And I think we're seeing that in the education system present day.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. I've got two kids, and it's one of the, I'd say it's the biggest conflict in my life is balancing this. Like my wife is a teacher, right? So, you know, and we both, we believe in the power of education and the importance of it, but the structure and the manner in which it's traditionally done doesn't align with a lot of our values, right? But we're still teetering like one foot into that system, one foot out. But yeah, I look at especially my son who has all of this creative energy, but you sit him at a desk for 8 hours, it's the worst thing in the world for him, right? So you know, and I was the same way. You know, school could not have been. I mean, I got through it. I made a lot of friends and things like that, and ended up going to college. But every piece of it was not for me, right? Just that structured education. So, but all right. So you decided at an early age to join the military, join the Marines. And when did your interest, or maybe it goes back to childhood, but when did you start taking an interest in nature and conservation and land management, things like that?
Well, strangely, I'm actually a third generation farmer.
Okay.
So my grandfather was a sharecropper. He had 10 children, actually had 11 children, with my mother included. And as a child, I always thought my aunts and uncle had, you know, immense amounts of money because they moved to upstate. And the unfortunate thing, most people from my demographic, they associate agriculture with slavery, right? So they were left land. They knew how to farm, but they chose not to farm. So my mom tells me this story one day. She goes to church and the preacher has a sermon and it goes to the tune of sometimes it skips a generation. Right. So my grandfather, my mom comes back and she tells me my grandfather had two wishes. He wanted to own a house and he wanted to own a farm. My grandfather built the house. So she comes back and she tells me the story. And then she concludes, he got the house, you got the farm. So I knew there was a bit of biblical residue there for me because I understood what my assignment was. And I just was always interested in it. As far back as I can remember, all of my friends after I joined the Marine Corps, they always said, we knew you were joining the military. You always had a affinity for guns. I would take my gun out in the woods, shoot birds, bring them back to my grandmother, cook this chicken, get those out of my kitchens. Those aren't chickens. Um, and I remember this story very vividly. My uncle telling me, yeah, when you were a child, you always talked about wanting to have a gun as a flamethrower. You know, and it was just what I was seeing on television, what was being presented to me. But in my mind, I want to try that. So the first opportunity I got to join the military, I knew that was the path for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're 40. So you joined the military. What years did you join? Early 2000s, sounds like.
2003, straight out of high school. I left 5 days after graduation.
So Davian, you know, again, you're 17, you joined the Marines, you're heading into that life. You had this affinity going back to childhood for land and kind of knew that that was going to be a part of your life as well. But now you've got this military career. I want to kind of go from there, and I know your first, just from the content I've seen, your first foot into real estate was through single family rentals. Is that correct? Or flips, possibly, something like that?
So it was actually a piece of land. So
Okay.
I'll say it this way: no jump shot, no acting skills, no rap career. But my desire as a child was always to buy my mother a house. So I ended up buying a vacant parcel of land. I had just come back from Afghanistan for 2 weeks. I buy this vacant parcel of land and I'm going to build my mom a house. Now, at this point in time, it just didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. So I ended up selling that lot, but I would have been restricted to a HOA, which I have no love for present day because of how they govern and operate themselves. So that was just the universe pushing me to do something a little different. But that was my first investment, was a raw vacant piece of land that I intended to develop and build for my mother.
Right. And so through that transaction, did it light a fire or light a light, like a light bulb go off, like, hey, there's an opportunity for me to supplement this military career with real estate?
Yes, and I had just finished reading Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which was more about mindset versus real estate, and I just knew it was a asset that I was, for certain that, hey, I probably should start investing in something outside of what the military is willing to give me.
Got it. All right. So that's the real estate part. We'll dive into that in the land here in a minute. I want to get into your Instagram handle,
Yeah.
lifting weights and real estate. Explain that to me.
So I'm in Afghanistan. I'm coming from the United States Embassy in Kabul, and initially my name was Debonair Davian on Instagram, and it was just, I don't know, that was just how I saw myself, like, oh, I like to interact with people, so on and so forth. But then I'm walking, and I was like, I lift weights every single day, and I enjoy real estate. And then I searched it and seen if the name was available, and that's when I changed my handle. This was maybe 2011. Um, so I went ahead and changed my handle because it kind of resonated with what I was doing in the direction that I was going. So last evening, I actually made a post that talked about my Instagram handle. That's a constant question that I get. And I kind of lay it down like lifting weights is what gave me the discipline to continuously invest in real estate. But when I invest in real estate, I invested in my community because I wanted to be a contributor to the change that I wanted to see. So that was a huge thing for me. So we'll talk about some of the investments that I have made. I'm sure you're going to ask some more detailed questions that we can get into that. But that's how I came about creating that name for Instagram. And I haven't changed it since, but I always get the question, this is a farm channel. And then I emphasize and explain to people, land is the greatest asset available. It begins and it ends with land. You can't do anything without it.
Yep. And we're going to dive into that. I think it's an attention catching handle for sure. So I think that's good. Like it sucked me in with that one video of you hunting, and then now it just I've followed ever since. And obviously you're much more than a hunter. So but I want to just take a few minutes and talk about um, lifting weights, just health and overall mindset around that, because I have a similar mindset when it comes to I work out every day, and there's a reason I do that, and it's more than the aesthetics, right? I'm not trying to only look good. I have a bigger vision in mind, and for me, I'm always seeing that 80-year-old me and
Right.
how capable he is. So I choose to do a hard thing every day, and it kind of calibrates the rest of the day. What's your relationship with health and fitness and wellness, from different perspectives?
And so that is a excellent point. So right now, the hat that I'm wearing says lifting weights in real estate. On the inside, it says health can't wait. Well, actually, on the inside of the hat, it says wealth can't wait. And then I have a wristband that typically goes with it, and it says health can't wait. So when you typically take your hat off, you typically sit with the inside facing you. So your wealth should always be top of mind. And then because this is the gateway to everyone's stomach being your hand, you have that wristband on. It lets you know that your health can't wait either. You have to take both serious. How many rich people or well-off people do we see die too soon because they couldn't control the impulses of what they consume as far as what they put in their body? So I started making merchandise that was surrounding the philosophy of, always keeping your fitness and your health at the forefront because it may be the very thing that saves your life.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. And I love that. And I would imagine with the wealth can't wait, you're talking more than just monetary wealth. Like you're talking time, freedom, flexibility, and stuff like that. So, and then the health, obviously, with that time that you earn through wealth. I look at money as a tool, right? It's a tool to access other things that I'm more passionate about, but none of that's available if I don't have my health. So I love that messaging there. So, all right, now let's get into some real estate stuff. So you start dabbling a little bit. You buy that piece of land, and where did it go from there? When did you start having like a portfolio mindset? I'm going to try to start building something. And what were your next steps?
Well, so being a military intelligence analyst, I take a lot of information, I synthesize it, and then I tell you what the information means. It's kind of what you see me do on social media now is where I'm learning out loud and I'm sharing what I learned with people of what I semi-master, but you're never really truly a master at anything, right? So for me, the game changer, I was buying single family homes, but I quickly realized it was a zero-sum game because now I have more insurance. And if I'm not buying multifamilies with a single roof, and then one insurance payment, I'm just going to continue to pay premiums. I got fortunate in 2019 and I bought 3 houses on a single street. Now, I say 3 for a reason, and that number is going to be important to you after I finish this statement. So I buy these 3 parcels. The owners are from out of town. It's heirs property that was passed down to them. So 2020, I'm looking at the geospatial information system, which is the maps that go through your county municipality. And I'm clicking on one parcel because I'm trying to look at the lot lines for fences. And you keep having 2 separate parcels pop up, and I can't figure out exactly what's going on. So I email the county and they say, well, these 2 addresses share the same tax map key. I got a house for free. So that's why I emphasize that number 3, because I got the 4th house for free. There's 7 houses on that street. I own 4 of them, in which I created a community garden. So there's a video I made probably a year ago. I'll tag you in it. But I kind of talk about, in my community, there's always this notion of buying the block. But if you're buying the block and you're just creating Airbnbs, then are you really supporting the community that you're actually a part of? So I wanted to change the narrative, but I also wanted to be a mirror for other people to see themselves, realizing that this is possible for anyone. You just have to want it.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I love a takeaway there for, there's a lot of takeaways, but one big one is finding value in real estate that others don't see. I've got several examples I could give you, from my real estate experience. One being, a piece of land here in Virginia that I think it was 90 acres, something like that.
Yeah.
Nobody could see any value in it at the price. What I saw was it was set up. It was like 89 acres, and then a 1 acre had been carved out years ago by the county for a right of way through like an old railroad bed or something like that. Well, I could see the potential, and I talked to the county of, instead of doing a subdividing, I could do a boundary line adjustment. So I could, very low cost. They go in, I don't need much approval, and they do an adjustment. Now I've got 2 equal acreage lots that I was able to do something with. And your example, doing that additional research, using the intelligence and the knowledge that you have to create value and force value. And then you took it another step further with the mentality, I'm trying to create a community and add value to that as well. So kudos to you for that. So where does it go from there? You're still in the military, but you're buying these properties, or at that time. So where did it evolve from there?
And so I basically transitioned from actively being in the military. So 2008, I end up meeting a guy in Iraq, and he was a former LAPD police officer. And then he told me about defense contracting. Didn't know what it was, had never heard of it. But I knew when he told me how much money he was making, I had an aha moment. I go back to my desk and I realize, wait, I'm doing all the work, but he's getting paid all the money. So I knew from that moment that I would exit the Marine Corps and I would go back overseas and provide the same service and support I did in uniform. And that would catapult what I would do in the real estate space. So every deal that I've had, I've self-funded out of my pocket. I've never went to a bank besides for my primary residence.
Right.
So outside of that, that was the light bulb for me saying, I think real estate would be a really good vehicle because now I can retain the wealth. What I come to realize is everyone has to pay taxes. No one's immune to it, unless you're a large corporation. But barring them, the average Joe has to pay taxes. So when I buy these properties, all the money that I'm putting into the property, I get to write off. Now, when it's time for me to get my money back out of the properties, the average person has to sell the property. That creates capital gains. But instead, I just do a cash out refinance. That doesn't trigger any type of taxable event. I now pull my equity back out, and then I rinse and repeat to continuously build my portfolio.
Yep. Yeah, that's how we built our entire portfolio, my partner and I, through the BRRRR strategy. Used our own money to buy it, fix it up, refinance it. And I mean, you can do that, refinance, as you're paying principal down multiple times over a long period. And that's tax-free money. And there's other, we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of tax strategy, but there's like with real estate, there's endless strategies that are above board. There's not any gray area strategies. Like these are actual, but a lot of people aren't aware of them. So at some point, so you're building a real estate portfolio through that strategy. The entire time, was land always on your mind? I know you had that, it goes back to being a child and it was in your family, but was it always on your mind that you're working towards being a farmer, having land and growing something there?
Right. So 2020 occurs and we're leaving Afghanistan. So the Taliban's now taking over the government. America's saying, hey, we're going to leave. So we pull out of Afghanistan. In that last 5 days, I'm not in the office. There's no requirements. There's no do-outs for me. And I'm watching this television show called Life Below Zero. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I am, yeah.
So I'm watching Life Below Zero, and there's this lady on the show. Her name is Sue Aiken. And I just remember seeing Sue out on the tundra, living off the land. And I was like, you know what? I want to do that. And I had previously bought 12 acres of land because that was the one thing I didn't have in my portfolio. Hey, you have all this real estate, but you don't own any land. And every book that I've read, people always talk about owning land. So I buy 12 acres for $19,000. I end up buying my first hunting rifle, which was a Remington 700 varmint tactical rifle with the triangle barrel. I bought that rifle because it was the first sniper rifle of the United States Marine Corps. So I just wanted to, I figure if a Marine can use it, then anyone could use it. We're not the smartest guys. So I had to go with this particular rifle. So I come home, I hunt on this property after having it cleared, had a guy come up with a skid steer. He shows me a setup. And then I became interested in that. Like, oh, so I can just come, create the landscape I want. And I remember as a child passing by these large timber thickets, but I never realized someone owned them. I just thought it was just land out there. I never knew someone had deeded and title to those properties. So I ended up buying the 12 acres, and that's what kind of sparked how I actually got into farming. Was I did a cross-collateralized loan, something I read in a book, and then I took the equity from the 12 acres to buy the 64 acres with zero money out of pocket. So when I tell this story online, most people are saying, oh, well, now you have 2 mortgages. No, I actually only have 1 mortgage for 75 acres, and it's it's actually south of $1,000. I pay less than $1,000 for my farm. And again, that's another tax implication or tax strategy through agriculture. That's how you're going to get some of that money back as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about and because what you just mentioned and walked through, your curiosity sucked you into it, right? Your curiosity, you saw that land. Oh, I didn't realize people own that land. Now now I'm buying 12 of my own acres. Oh, I can just get that same machine and clear the land and do this. And then that has evolved to you having a full functioning farm at this point with animals and, everything that goes along with it. But a lot of folks see that, the timber stand there and the intimidation of never thinking that they could be a part of that or just not knowing the steps to take keeps a lot of people from doing it, right? So and I know you're very well versed and you talk about this quite a bit, but let's talk about some strategies that whether it's somebody already in real estate or just a person that's living on an acre and got their house and they're just comfortable with that, but they have interest. What are some easy steps for them to get into owning land or managing land or having some type of more experience with nature and conservation?
Right. So for the land piece, the first thing I would say is just being creative. Like everyone has a element of creativity, no matter what it is, if it's in fashion, if it's in music, if it's in writing or literature, everyone's creative in some capacity. So let's say you find an acre of land, almost everyone needs a place to stay. So being that you need shelter from the elements, you might buy that acre of land and it already has the utilities on it. A RV or a camper is cheaper than a car right now. So if you're willing to sacrifice a little and live in that camper, now you can start learning about the land. Where does the sun rise? Where does the sun set? Where are my low-lying areas? So these are all advantages. If you're willing to take that sacrifice, someone else isn't.
Yeah.
And as it relates to growing your own food, if you look at our food supply, we only have 2% of agriculture producers in the United States. So do we have a fragile system, or do we have a overdependence by 98% of the people? So by virtue of you growing something, now let's go back to community. If you're growing peppers and I'm growing squash and someone else is growing zucchini, and you can do it in a prolific manner, meaning you're going to be really good at it, now we create the barter system. While I understand money is a tool, money is not my master. So when you look at it from that vantage point, while I need money to operate, I want to take a step back and say, well, what value can I give my community that doesn't require money? It just requires a little effort and a little time. When you take on that mindset, now we're sharing resources. And when something else becomes available, hey, there's 50 acres down the street. You and I already have a relationship. We can subdivide it. 5 people. You're going to get 10 acres. I'm going to get 10 acres. And we're still going to operate with the same element and attitude in which we started with.
Yeah. I love that. I love the kind of how you kick that off with kind of having a creative mindset. And it's that same mindset with land has served me well, because like the land I built my house on, that I've been on for 10 years. I've owned the land for 14 years, but I found that land by being creative. And I went, my wife and I for years drove around and handpicked farms that we would like to own one day, right? And we were just keeping a list, not knowing how we were going to like find them or get them one day. But eventually I got to a point where we had the finances to make a move, and I wrote 100 letters. Hand wrote 100 letters, probably maybe 80 letters, whatever it was, all in my local area, very personalized. And that ended up, long story short, led me to buying the top farm on the list that I had through those letters and stuff like that. So I wrote letters to, let's call it 80 to 100 people that were not at the time marketing their land for sale. I got creative and sparked up several conversations that ultimately led to it. So that created the creativity, and I got it at an extremely good value. And just little tactics like that when it comes to land. I mean, you pull on somebody's heartstrings, and you can see that, like, my message was, I want to buy a piece of land to raise my family on. I don't want to develop it. I don't want to subdivide it. And that was the messaging, and it led to a conversation that ultimately led to a good deal. So that creativity piece takes on a lot of forms when you're dealing with land. So
Yeah, and so I think what you're saying is key, because when you own land, oftentimes we can't be here forever. You and I, we're both going to leave this place at some point in time. And if someone were to offer to buy your farm and it's going to be developed because of the philosophy and mindset you have, you wouldn't sell it to them.
Nope.
So oftentimes people in the spaces that we're in, we want farmland to stay farmland. We want the country to stay country. We don't want it to be developed. If we wanted the city, we would move there. Sometimes that's your inroad. And the other thing is, you have to put it in the universe. So by virtue of you putting that letter out, even if I'm not interested, my buddy may be thinking about, hey, I need to figure out what to do with my land. And then he says, hey, I know a guy, Jason, I got a letter from him. Let me give you his contact information. And you and that guy start going back and forth. And truthfully, people who own land in the space and they operate doing the things that we're doing, they're not looking to take the shirt off your back. Right. They're just glad that it can continue to serve as many people as possible.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So now where you've evolved to is like most of your content is around your land and your land management and the value you extract from it, the value that you put into it, all of those things. So with that said, you've built, because you have very well done content. Is that something you manage on your own? And I want to get into kind of building your audience now, and then we'll get back into the land piece of it. But you've built quite an audience. I don't know what your numbers are, but you probably got 100,000 followers on Instagram, and then other platforms. You got folks paying attention. Was the intent? I know back to 2011, you said is when you came up with that handle. but was the intent all along to build an audience so you could have more impact, or did it just naturally evolve to that?
It just naturally evolved to that. I didn't choose the farming niche. I was doing things mostly on real estate, but that was somewhat oversaturated. But I did a rabbit video, it went viral, 1.8 million views, tons of impressions. And what I realized I was doing on the internet, on at least Instagram, what everyone else was doing. Take videos and pictures of what I'm doing, put some music behind it, and just let it happen naturally. The only people that are really seeing that is the people that I know. So those that engage that I'm getting, hey, great work, so on and so forth. Is this house going to be for rent? Then just one day, I start talking. People started listening, and I was like, oh, I guess people are interested in what I have to say. And again, I go back to my training. I can take information, package it, and then present it in the most realistic form. Right. So none of my content is scripted. I don't write any of it down. Usually is I'm doing something and it's like, oh, I should make a video while I'm doing this. So it's all by happenstance. None of it is thought of, prepared. I just literally just go with it. And unfortunately, most meetings that I go into, engagements, I don't even know what the slides look like. Once I get in there, I'm just going to be natural because I want it to be a natural conversation because you never know what you're going to pull out from that. So I always want to do it in the moment because I don't know what I'm going to share and I don't know what needs to be told. So I just do what feels right in the moment.
Did you at any point have to overcome a battle of like maybe imposter syndrome or feeling like I certainly have struggled with this transitioning from the corporate world that I was in for so long, and I was extremely private. I had no footprint on social media, very little, other than my wife tagging me in vacation videos and stuff like that. But and then I went into real estate, which I'm heavy into now, and a lot of the marketing that for the niche I'm in, I have to be present online quite a bit, and I spent about 6 months to a year extremely uncomfortable with it because it just wasn't natural to me. Did you experience any of that early on or anymore? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Well, for me, just like anyone else, a new space, you don't know how people are going to respond to you. You don't know what the things are going to be said about you or to you. So naturally, people don't want to feel vulnerable. But you get to a point where even if you're saying good things or bad things, you're still saying something. So I still have your attention. The difference is when I see how many distractions are out here, I can choose to be like everyone else or I can just choose to be myself. So I never felt like I was imposing or someone that I wasn't. This is just naturally who I am. So I think the messages that I curate, they're going to reach the intended audience.
Yeah.
That's why I don't, yeah. And that's why I don't try to get into what someone else is doing. And I'm like, I never look at someone else's success as my success is less than because I get to define that. And that's the unfortunate thing is we have this illusion of what we see in the information environment of what we think success is. You might see a commercial for a nice high-end car, but you and I can guarantee you've never seen a commercial to tell you to buy land.
Right.
And that's intentional.
Yep. Yeah. And with that though, the some of the content that you share, especially with the audience size you've built, some of that content probably rubs people the wrong way. Like if you're skinning a deer or got a pig hanging up or something like that. So I'm sure you get a lot of negativity. Do you pay any attention to that? Do you engage with that to try to provide education? What's your I guess what's your philosophy when it comes to the negative part of social media?
So there's two opposing views. The first is be careful arguing with fools because from a distance you can't tell who is who, right? That's the first. The secondary is I look at every opportunity, whether good or bad, because sometimes you're going to have positive reinforcements, other times you're going to have negative reinforcements. But oftentimes the negative reinforcement is someone who's operating from a lack of understanding. I've had guys say things like, oh, you're killing those animals, you should be better than that. And I asked them, well, what is your alternative? What is your food source? Tell me what you're doing. And I'm not saying it to challenge you. I'm asking you to enlighten me because maybe you know something that I don't know. The truth is this, anybody can learn from anybody, but you have to first be willing to. You can learn from a child. You definitely can learn from an older person. So when I take that approach, now I can get my aspects and my understanding. Those things are enhanced by someone else's lived experience. So I don't necessarily have to make the same mistake, or I'm willing to change my perspective on something. I'm not a hardliner because being a hardliner would mean I'm probably obsessed about the topic.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. You're not married to any one idea or anything like that. I have a couple things that, based off some posts you've made over the last few months, I wanted to dive into a little bit and get a little more perspective from your end. The first is you mentioned earlier or throughout this interview with your, obviously at an early age, 17 years old, you joined the military, joined the Marines, and to this day you have a a deep connection to military and veterans and things like that. But I've seen you make posts about programs, like specifically real estate and even more specifically land programs that are out there and available for veterans. Do you care to elaborate and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so in a roundabout way, I was prompted by this ad, let's call it 2 years ago. And it was a campaign from Kubota, and it's called Geared to Give. In order to participate in the Geared to Give program, you had to join this secondary program called the Farmers Veteran Coalition. So I joined the FVC for the state of South Carolina. I go in, I meet everyone, and for some reason I feel like I'm politicking, even though I'm not a politician. So I just go around and naturally meet people, and I ask them, "Hey, what do you know about artificial intelligence, content creation?" And I'm basically there to just carry the word and say, "Hey, this is how you're going to get your brand noticed, and this is how your audience is going to find you and your customers." So fast forward to a year later, I then was unanimously voted to be the president for the South Carolina chapter. So I would be remiss to not share what resources are available to veterans, because I want them to know that, hey, you don't have to start from zero, because your service means something to a lot of people who get to live these free liberties in this country. And there's companies and corporations that want to acknowledge that. So I want to make sure our veterans know about these programs, but not only veterans, the spouses of those veterans, and sometimes the children of those veterans. And that veteran, oftentimes, they're the leaders in most of their families. So if I can tap into them, I can create more farmers and mobilize those guys into service as well, to help our food systems.
Yeah. So as far as, and what I'll do is I'll get with you afterwards and get links to all of that for people that are interested in more information. But I would imagine, um, if folks are, Davian, did I freeze? Hold on one second.
Yeah, momentarily you did.
Okay.
All right, you're back.
All right. So I would imagine probably the easiest way for people to learn more is I can just put your social media link and they can message you and to get more information. But I definitely want to highlight that, and I know there's a lot of programs and we could probably spend an hour going through each one.
Right.
But I just want, and we do have a lot of the military community and there's a lot of folks that are transitioning out of the military, right? Looking for their next step that may have that watch this podcast and may have interest. So I encourage all of you to reach out to Davian. We'll drop his links and stuff like that. Another topic I wanted to cover. Well, before I go here, um, let's talk about your now. If folks follow your content, you have a very active farm, and it's not a lot of people think farming, they think, soybeans or cotton fields or cornfields and stuff like that. Talk a little bit, if you will, about your farm and the value you're able to extract from how many acres is it that you're on?
I'm on 64 acres.
Okay, so talk about the value and the production that 64 acres does for not just you, but your community and things like that. So if you care to share that.
Yeah, so I could appreciate you talking about like monoculture where we're growing rotational crops in rows, but you being an outdoorsman like myself, nothing in nature grows in a single line,
Right.
right? So when you look at that, if we continue to till the land, you're losing topsoil by the inches every single season. So by the time the next generation is ready to farm, there is nothing to farm. That is how deserts are created, right? So I participate in what you call regenerative farming. I like the ideal of regenerative farming because I'm a land steward. I'm there to help heal the land because I want to be able to pass it on to the next generation. There's an adage, a wise man plants the trees. Well, a nation grows wiser when men plant trees whose shades they'll never sit in. My perspective is a family becomes great when men plant fruit trees for children they will never meet. So I'm big on legacy. So the reason why I put the information out that I do, because there will be people who follow me, and this will be a testament to my presence here during my time here. And so I want that to be a digital dictionary, if you will, or a digital recollection of my time here. So what I participate in is regenerative agriculture. By letting the animals graze the land, their manure, and the chicken scratching and everything else. I learned a lot of this just from watching Joel Salatin.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of taking information from other places, figuring out how to utilize it on my property, and then there's going to be small nuances, just like a recipe. There's something I can give you, and you say, "Hey, well, actually, I added a little bit of cayenne." So by doing so, I'm now able to teach people you got a quarter acre, half an acre, or you don't have a yard at all. The things that I do, I use my farm as a test bed to be able to show other people what is possible. To your other point, not just the land. So when we think about regenerative agriculture, when we think about monoculture, there's also timber farms. Farming can be anything you want to do. And based on the USDA definition, as a farm producer, you're only required to generate $1,000 a year. That's your entry point. If you can accomplish that, and that might be selling to your friends, half a cow, whole cow, chickens, whatever the case may be. But that's what I participate on my farm. And I'm just willing to try things and fail at them. But I don't look at it as failure. I look at it as feedback. I got into pigs. I still have pigs. I got into goats. I didn't really care for goats because if you build a 10-foot fence, a goat has an 11-foot ladder.
Yeah. Yeah.
They ate my garden completely one year, and it took me 3 days to go out there and face the chaos that had occurred. But that's my message to other people, right? I'm raising a few heritage breed turkey right now, and I let them free range, but I didn't know they would just be pests every place that I go. Like, man, you turn around, the turkeys are following you. You get on the tractor, they already have this instinct. So what I love about this is nature teaches you so many things. So when I come out on that bush hog, the turkeys are running behind me. But if I look up in the sky, the hawks are also flying because the field mice will be running out. So now I get to see that perpetual cycle in nature and how that operates. I can't see that living in a concrete jungle.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. One of my favorite songs and lines from a song, and you may have heard it, but it's it's a Leonard Skinner song. All I can do is write about it. There's a line in there, I can see the concrete a creeping. Please take me in mind before that comes. And
Yeah.
that, that line plays in my head all the time because I'm always in this. I'll call it like an internal conflict or contradiction because I'm in the real estate game, right? So I'm investing in development sometimes and things like that. But at the same time, those same developments are anti what I truly feel sometimes, right? So
Right.
I've had that battle within myself and I've dialed it back quite a bit where kind of to you seem to have this instinct early on where you would buy things with your 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 true core values in place. So you bought those 3 or 4 houses with the mindset of I'm trying to build a community, right? It wasn't just to make as much money. And I'm still, like I've said over the years, I've gotten involved with some bigger projects that hindsight that didn't align with, I did that to get a big return, right? It didn't align with who I am. And now I'm adjusting everything more towards that because of everything you just said. I mean, you mentioned regenerative farming, and you mentioned Joel Salatin, and you got White Oak Pastures, and there's a bunch of them out there. But I encourage people to go to YouTube and look up soil videos where folks take, and there's a lot of illustrations where people are, they'll have a jar of soil from a monocrop farm and then a regenerative farm and watch that water roll through that soil and how much difference it is and what's running off through that soil and whatnot. And it'll blow your mind. And the challenge is, and I think this is a national challenge that we have, and you talk a lot about food security and stuff like that, but
Right.
it costs a lot of money to run a farm that way, right? For the actual landowner to run a farm that way. Therefore, that cost gets passed on to the consumer. And a lot of people just end with that price tag in mind, right? Or instead of paying $13 a pound at Kroger for a ribeye that I don't know where it came from, I'd have to pay $22 a pound to get it from a regenerative farm. And a lot of people just stop there. But I just encourage folks to dig a little more into the story behind all of that, and it might encourage you to spend a little bit more money on different types of food. So, or
So
raise it yourself.
yeah, my philosophy is find a farmer, make a friend. Maybe it's not for you, but by you supporting that local farmer, you're supporting your local economy. So now that dollar gets to be circulated to a small business, and then yeah, it may leave the community, but at least it's made its way through your community, and now you're helping those that are in need as well.
Yeah.
With my community garden, I paid $10,000 out of my own pocket for that. Like the community may think it's free, but it wasn't free for me,
Yeah.
but I made it free to them
Right.
because that's important to me. I think your most basic problems in any community can be solved when you mitigate food insecurity. The unfortunate thing is we're going to develop ourselves out of a place to eat,
Yeah.
right? So when you look at it, as the developments become more relevant and they're putting you in these condos and these townhouses and they're giving you granite countertops, their goal is to make money. That's what capitalism is. But capitalism could be a race to the bottom because what COVID showed you, no matter how much money you had, I was in the line at Costco. I was in Hawaii. I'm wearing a mask. And when you walk in and someone says, you can only have 2 of these items, you can only have 1 of this item, I quickly realized it doesn't matter how long your money is. You got to worry about your food supply. The average grocery store only has 4 days worth of food. But I'll take you a step further. There's 30 million lawns unproductive here in America. They're growing, beautiful annual plants, but they're not growing something that is of substance. So if we just take a step back and say, well, I still want my yard to be beautiful, but what can I grow that could be beneficial to both the pollinators, because we have a dying bee population, the monarch butterfly, which is almost extinct. What can I do to support those ecosystems? And we won't appreciate those things until they're no longer here. So think about the next generations who will never know these things existed because we weren't good stewards of what we have.
Yeah.
God has given us everything we've needed, but somehow we've let man sell certain things to us, just like education. I share what I share because knowledge is free. But when they tell you have to go to college for this accreditation to get this job, that's an ecosystem where I'm separating you from the very resource that you're out here fighting to get, and that's money.
Yep. You mentioned the next generation. There, you can show them, but you can also I, it's top of mind every day with my kids, right? I want them to know, and you mentioned COVID. This was this was probably one of the proudest dad moments I've ever had when COVID hit and it was all the panic. And my daughter, she's 14 now, so she would have been 9 at the time. But she said, I remember her saying, like, Dad's good thing you taught us how to hunt because we don't have to worry about all this mess. We got all we eat is venison and the things we kill, and that's 70% of our protein. And to hear it from that next generation, to you try to teach them, but to hear her make that connection, that was a proud moment for me, So, yep. So, one more thing I want to get to, and then a couple other follow-up questions before we wrap up. But recently, and I know a lot of folks listening and a lot of folks across the country have no idea this even went down. But there was a big concern or threat to our public lands very recently. Out in Utah, there was it got very close to a bill being passed that was going to allow millions of acres of public land to be sold off to private entities, individuals, and whatnot. A big fight in the outdoor and hunting community, and all of that occurred. That fault was won temporarily. This is always going to be a threat, and I know you made some posts along the way about this whole issue. If you don't mind, because you do such a good job articulating complex ideas, if you could just share the importance of being aware of this issue and the ongoing issue, because technically, if you pay taxes in this country, that was your land that they were trying to sell off, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, articulate some thoughts around that if you don't mind.
So I'll start broadly and then I'll bring the context in.
Sure.
So when you go to places like Dubai, I've probably been to Dubai 25 times easily, just from my travels overseas. But when you traverse through Dubai and you stay at certain hotels, you have to pay for beach access. This is happening in Hawaii as well, where if you don't live in Honolulu or if you don't live in Princeville and you want to go to the beach and you don't have a local identification card, you have to pay to go there. That's the price of tourism, right? So when you see it happening in countries like this, and then you see it happening in a place like America, when we pay so much in taxes and they're telling you, hey, you can't traverse these lands because now they're going to be sold. Now, the concern is, or the uninformed person would believe, hey, well, now there's more land and now I have accessibility. But the truth is this: if you look at what's happening in, what is it, Memphis, Tennessee, with Elon Musk and his supercomputer, he sits on top of a natural aquifer. That's a natural resource that supports that community. The thing about artificial intelligence and a lot of the systems that are being built now, they need water cooling systems. Those water cooling systems need clean water, not gray water. So I believe the tech bros and the people with the deepest pockets, they're showing you what their blueprint is. So to your point, this is only temporary. This will only get worse. And that's going to make a lot of animals instinct. I now have bobcats in my woods. I have coyotes, but I also have black bear. We have it with authority because we've seen it on camera. That's because they're clear cutting all the timber around me. Because another growing problem we have in our country is um, the opioid crisis or the methamphetamine crisis. So you're having granddad and grandma, they're cutting the land, they're clear cutting the land because they don't want to leave it to the kids because the kids aren't going to take care of it. So when you have those two competing sentiments, you have the corporations buying all the land, and then you have the generations that are still here that are going to be leaving here soon enough. They're clear cutting the land and no one's coming back to do uh, reforestation plans. So how do you pull the carbon out of the environment? So these have cascading consequences, right? So it's not just about being able to hunt, fish, trap. While these are primitive natural ways that we want to live off of the land, imagine when you have to pay to go in nature. But wait, we're already doing that. So when you think about that, now that's going to be a price of admission, and everyone's already living in a concrete jungle. How often do you get to walk outside with no shoes on and just ground yourself?
Yeah, for me, every day, right?
And then when you meet someone from the city, the ideal of walking outside with no shoes on horrifies them.
Yep.
And it lets you know they're kind of out of touch from reality. And I'll say this: most people who come to visit me, and when they realize, as far as their eye could see, I own everything. As far as the vantage point of their eye, of their view, I own that. And they quickly realize, like, man, I've really been missing out. I thought it was this, and they have this misconception because we don't even show you nature on social media. We're showing you things that come from land, luxury goods. Well, what type of animal does it come from?
Yeah.
So you need those resources.
Yep. Yeah. And then they're like we're both on the eastern side of the country. There's in Virginia, there's very little public land, right?
Right.
But out west, it is hundreds of millions of acres that we own, right? If I wanted to go right now, what are we're approaching September, and I want to go elk hunt out in Colorado. There's a couple legal things I have to do to get a tag and stuff like that, but take hunting out of it. I just want to go hike on my land that I own as a taxpayer. That is available to me all over this country, and it was very close to a precedent being set where a lot of our land, I keep saying our land because it is taxpayer money's land, was about to be sold off to these developmental entities that were going to do whatever they do with them.
Right.
That was a big threat. And I just want to encourage people, whether you have interest in that land or not, or at land like that, pay attention to this, right? And this recent, again, it's going to keep coming up, but this recent battle that was won by the the taxpayers, it was only won because enough people were paying attention and enough people with big enough platforms fought against it, right? So everybody says or feels sometimes like they don't have a voice or they don't have an influence. That was a collaboration of efforts that reached out to enough political figures all around the country to put pressure on the people that were trying to introduce this to make them, at the end of the day, in the last hour, scrap it, right? So that's, I kind of want to hammer that point. If you feel like you're too small and your voice and your vote doesn't matter, it really does. And this was a great example of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to kind of put a bow on that, right? At the end of the day, they sell off this public land, and then what do we really have left? Like, you just gave me a whole content idea just listening to you talk about it, and you're tapping on that camera. Hey, landowner. And they're like, who, me? Yes, you pay taxes.
Right.
This is all yours. The great outdoors belongs to you. But imagine when you can no longer say the great outdoors.
Yep. Yeah.
That would be detrimental.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, you don't have to, folks listening that that live in our condo or a townhouse or an apartment building and really don't have a interest or any experience with the stuff we're talking about, the stuff we're talking about does impact you in a lot of ways, and all the way to what Davian was talking about earlier in the grocery store, right? A lot of people might be critical of your videos because you're skinning a deer or whatever, but they'll go to the grocery store and buy 2 pounds of hamburger. Well, that burger went through a much worse process than what you just watched Davian put online, right? It's gruesome, factory farming and all of that. So just pay attention to it. I'm not encouraging anybody to make changes. I just ask for people to pay more attention.
And to your point, right, the ground beef, and I want to emphasize this because when you eat a burger at Five Guys, are you really eating a single cow, or is it a series of different cows? When you go to Buffalo Wild Wings, you order a 10-piece. How many chickens did it take for you to get that 10-piece? People aren't realizing this.
Yeah.
They think that food is just, it comes on a truck, it shows up at this location, and they cook it. But it's the worst type of food that you could consume.
It is. And those animals, you want to talk about like having compassion for animals. Go follow Davian and watch how he treats his animals. Those animals have the happiest lives you could imagine until one day it just goes away, lights go out, and now it's providing for him and his family. You go get it from a grocery store, and most of which is raised in a factory farming setting. These chickens are penned up their entire life. They have no quality of life. There's no care given to their comfort and quality and things like that. Same with cows, pigs, you name it. So when you're trying to show compassion and doing so by being anti-hunting or anti what Davian's showing or what I might show on my stuff, you're actually, but you're still eating meat. That's not compassionate. That's anti-compassion. You are supporting and propping up this other side that is very ugly, but you don't see it very often.
Clever marketing. That's what's beating us, is literally a guy that's telling you free range just means he's not in a cage.
Yeah.
But he's still in a confinement operation.
Right. Yep. So Davian, I want to kind of wrap up with, again, you'll have several folks are going to check you out and follow along, I would imagine. If you could articulate your overall message and just kind of like an elevator pitch of what you're trying to share with the world and what you're trying to have influence on with everything you're sharing.
What I would say to that is every time a matriarch or patriarch leaves this place, a library burns down. You were fortunate to be born into a lifestyle where someone showed you a tradition that you still honor and teach your children. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have that, to have those memories. When I was a police officer, I didn't know my uncle was the first Black police officer in the town that I'm from until I walked across that stage with my law enforcement certification. So the reason I share what I share is because a lot of these kids, they don't have dads. They don't have role models. So I'm trying to bridge that gap via farming, via aviation, via hunting. There's not a lot of people who look like me that occupy these spaces. So I'm here to be that beacon of light to show them the realm of possibility. I'm here to say, hey, if you don't know how to do it, ask. I always get this response from people. They send me a DM and I respond to them. And the response is, oh my God, you responded. I'm a person just like you are.
Right.
I put something in the universe and you asked a question about it. And if I can answer the question, I'll respond to you. That's the whole intent, is the social engagement. Before this interview, you and I were complete strangers. Yep. But then we find out we have way more in common than what we discussed here today. So I know you and I will maintain a relationship and continue to talk about real estate and continue to talk about opportunities and continue to talk about land. So to surmise what I do on my platform, I'm just here to be a vessel. Oftentimes people say things like, I want to be a vessel. And if you're a person of God, sometimes that may be you having cancer, surviving it, and other people seeing you had the courage to fight so they can endure the same fight should it be bestowed upon them.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I'm just a vessel. I'm not swayed by any man. I'm only inspired by God. That's what puts me in the mindset and the space to do this. So this is my way of serving the people.
I love it. I mentioned earlier how my mind is always thinking about 80-year-old Jason, right? Like
Right.
looking back on things. Um, put yourself there. 80-year-old Davian, you're looking back, you're reflecting, you have your health, you have your mind and everything. What does success look like at that point to you? Like, what's the legacy? What motivates you when you look back, fast forward 40 years and now you're looking back, what's going to be successful to you?
That's a great question. And I'm going to do a color analogy. So think of a kaleidoscope, a prism of colors. So to the unfamiliar, I may be gray or black. To the people who know me, my family members, my mother, I may be blue or hue of green. To people who I don't fancy so much, I may be more of a red. But what matters the most to me is not who I am, is how I make you feel after interacting with me. So the 80-year-old version of me is, what impact have I made? How many people have I helped? How much knowledge have I shared? That's what I want to leave. When I leave this world, that's what I want to be known for, is someone that was always willing to help. And I think that's how we keep finding these opportunities, is by virtue of serving other people.
Yeah, gave me goosebumps, man. That fires me up. Genuinely, I love that perspective. And you're truly living it. You're not just saying it. And for folks that need evidence of that, like I said, I'll have Davian's links. And like there's so many. I could go on forever, but I'm just gonna make this point. There's so many gurus out there that are intentionally trying to grow a big following for monetary gain, right? You mentioned in a lot of your videos, like if you're interested in more info, reach out, DM me this, whatever, and you'll coach folks. You are not doing that. Like the next step is not you trying to upsell to this tier and this tier and this tier, right? And
No.
that's unique in the I'll call it the influencer space or whatever space you want to call it, because most folks you see that do that and you click on it and you DM them, you're getting a whole series of this program, and then for $20 more a month I can do this, and we'll have one-on-ones and blah blah blah. You're not doing any of that. You're just genuinely living everything you just said when I asked you about your legacy, and you're living it front and center. And I want to be connected with folks like that in my life. I want to prop them up in any way I can and expose more people to them. And I'm very thankful that our paths have crossed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Likewise.
Yep. So Davian, again, I appreciate you taking the time. We could have probably gone for 3 hours and done a Joe Rogan podcast style here, because you got so many things that I'm curious and interested in. But I plan to keep in touch with you and continue following along. And like I've mentioned before, we're going to put all of your information in the show notes for people to follow along as well. And with that, man, I thank you for joining me on Burning the Ships podcast.
Hey, I appreciate it. You have a good day.
All right, my man. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Davian, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships podcast. As always, want to thank our sponsor, 608B Capital. We are a short-term lending fund, a debt fund, open for investors who are looking for a passive return. And also we offer products our main product, to fix and flippers and buy and holders, folks that are doing things like that in real estate. Also want to remind you about our referral program. Check out our website for more information on that, and we're happy to talk to you further if you're interested. Again, thank you for joining us on Burning the Ships, and do me a favor and go out and try to find someone or some way that you can add value into the world today. Think through it, zoom out, and try to find where you can add value. I think it'll help wrap up your day, wrap up your week, whatever you're working on a positive note, if you constantly think that way. Where can I add value? So with that, we thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships. Have a good one.